I'm here in Stirling in Scotland to meet Mriddle, who's a trans woman who also runs a rape crisis centre. Let's go say hello.
I am Mriddle Wadhwa. I am trans and a Piscean, a mother, a wife, half Zoroastrian, half Hindu. I'm an immigrant. I run a rape crisis centre. I'm a feminist. I'm a boss. And I speak my mind even when I shouldn't.
So Mriddle, tell me a bit about where we are and how you came about to work here.
So this is the Forth Valley Rape Crisis Centre and I am the manager. So the centre works with anyone over the age of 13 who's experienced sexual violence and anyone who's affected by it. The centre is part of the rape crisis movement. So we are a women-only space in the sense that only women work in the centre, although we work with anyone who's been affected, irrespective of gender identity. I think some of the key things that I'm really proud of that has happened in this movement is the increased awareness about forced marriage in Scotland and how we worked pretty hard to make sure that the law was implemented effectively. And most of our services, violence against women services, largely cater to white cis women. But there are others who don't naturally come to our spaces. Like, you can't expect people to know that you are inclusive if you're not explicit of your inclusion. So I think our journey around inclusion as a violence against women's movement is we are getting there. But I think there are some key things that we have to do and consistently, because equality is so fragile. I spend most of my life thinking about the status of minority ethnic women and migrant women in particular. Any minority who experiences oppression, you expect to be treated badly wherever you go. And so you steel yourself up for that. So when you say we are inclusive, well, you have to show what are you doing not to treat people badly. Can you connect with people's humanity? For me, it is an investment in attitude. Like, we need to expose ourselves to difference so that difference is normal. We just tend not to think of ourselves as different.
Is there a personal reason for getting into this line of work?
Staying on has been personal because it was pretty clear to me that I was the only trans woman in the women's aid movement, and I wasn't even sure whether I would have been hired if they had known that I was trans. When I came out individually to various colleagues, there was this disbelief, oh, you can't be trans. Like, what does a trans person look like? What does a cis woman look like? How do we know? Over a period of time, it became more and more important within my work in this movement to be a trans woman. My activism wasn't around trans activism because really what mattered to me more was my status as an immigrant woman and the women I worked with who came from immigrant backgrounds. I had the opportunity to deliver trainings across this country, and so invariably I would come out in all of my trainings, not just for people to change their perception of what an immigrant woman looks like or is or who she is, but also what a trans person looks like, So I think staying in it has become a personal thing.
So tell me what it was like growing up for you, and who was the first trans person that you met?
So I grew up in India. To me now, I would say it was like living in a war zone, and it really came home to me. I really understood it when people started speaking about the civil war in Syria and the use of snipers. And, that's the analogy I use. Like, a sniper would hit me every day, multiple times, from name calling to sexual violence. All of that happened all the time. When I became an adult, when I began to think a lot more practically and seriously about my transition, it was empowering to have grown up in a country where there is a recognition of the third gender or, of the non-binary in a sense. A trans person I identified with, I don't think I ever met one. I didn't have any resources. I didn't know where to go. And then I remember I chanced upon this article. A journalist had written an article about how they had set up a helpline for trans people. So I went to meet this journalist, and then they put me in touch with the local government hospital psychiatric unit. just a complete nightmare. Where this guy essentially told me, I don't believe you're trans because you would have insisted to go to a girls' school. Why did you go to a boys' school? And all this sort of shit. I was like, I'm trans, I'm not stupid. But eventually I found some doctors elsewhere in a different city, but it was so expensive. And, like trying to find a job and keep a job was a challenge. So when I was 17, 18, and I made a decision after a failed suicide attempt, I wanted to thrive. I just didn't want to, manage. So I think coming to that decision was very transformative. I just said to people, this is who I am, take it or leave it. I got 2 gifts. One was that I grew up in a household where my parents, not in any everyday way, ever told me not to be who I was, this effeminate child. But also I grew up into spiritual outlooks that don't have a concept of guilt in the same way. I think that has been the biggest gift. Like, I don't know what it feels to be guilty or ashamed of who you are. I have been lucky somehow to find myself in places where I was able to influence. And I think it is therefore important, if you have been given this opportunity by fate, to use that effectively. It's a responsibility to be your honest and true self at all times. I have the gift of being the eternal minority, from growing up in a mixed faith background, to being a trans woman, to being a person of color here, a migrant. What is important to me, therefore, in doing this work is to try and do something to make sure that others who come after me can come on their own merit. But I think what is most important right now is for more diverse voices to be heard, whether it is the voices of survivors of sexual violence or my colleagues who do a lot better work than I do. I need to make sure that my colleagues who I manage here, that their ideas really come to fruition. I mean, that is the most important reason why I do this work. What I'm really interested in is to make sure that everyone who goes through here feels that they have an opportunity to express what is really going on for them. That's why it's important, because this movement, particularly the women's movement, the feminist women's movement, that is built on the history of so many women who've transformed. One of the dangers of being this movement sometimes is that we don't know when to let more people sit on the table, and I think I do know the importance of it, because I just don't want to be the token trans VME woman in Scotland for many things, in many spaces. Hopefully that will not be forever, and hopefully people won't call me to speak at events anymore, because I think that is important too. We have to become redundant. That's why it's important.